2007. We moved fast. A 2-story detached house, stone stairs running up the outside like a spine. First floor, separate door. Another run of stone to the second floor landing. Our place. A final flight to the roof. The second floor threshold held things that did not belong to a cleaned-out life. One crutch leaning into the jamb, a folded wheelchair cut to the corner, the wheels traced with gray dust. The door stuck half an inch at the top, then gave. The air behind it had the flat, sweet mineral of an empty sink trap. Mom walked rooms with a notebook and a pen she kept tapping against her palm. I checked the kitchen. Because it was bright, and because the cabinet under the sink made a small, safe square on the floor, the door stuck there too. When it opened, I saw a scatter of hospital residue, spent syringes without needles, IV tubing kinked into loops, 2 crimped plastic bags with labeling worn to a ghost of blue. No odor of antiseptic, no rot, just that dry, metallic after smell, like coins held too long. We had a budget and a date. We signed. We hauled boxes. The wheelchair stayed on the landing through the first night until Mom took it down and leaned it against the outer wall near the stairs. Turned, so it faced nothing. Evenings were mine and Mom's. Everyone else worked late. I was 7. I liked the big window right at the front door because it took the whole stairwell view. I could see who was climbing before the knob turned. Milk glass in my hand, cool ring on my fingers. I stood with my face close to the pane and breathed to fog at the edge. I blinked. My brother's face was at the window, not behind me, not down on the stairs. Right there, inches beyond the glass, level with mine. Eyes forward, mouth closed, no shift, no smile. The skin looked the color it always was. The light took his lashes and wrote them on the pane. He wasn't due. The hour didn't fit. The landing outside the door has no room for feet that close to glass, unless the body turns and leans. He wasn't turned. He was central, as if the window had grown around him. I put the milk down. My hand found the latch, found the deadbolt, found the chain. The door opened to the landing. Stone steps below. Hot iron in the railing. Nothing facing me. No run of feet, no breath. The phone rang in the other room. Not speech, just the thin tap of an onboard scanner catching a transit beep through the speaker, a single plastic chirp. The kind that says a card met a gate. The sound was small, exact. The door hung open to warm air and the emptied landing. I shut it, because open doors draw flies, and because the window still held a faint oval where my breath had been, and I wanted it cleared. Night writes itself in corners. The second floor had many of those. After dark, the house had its own inventory. A weight landing hard on concrete outside, object unknown, sound like a heavy phone striking old pavement and bouncing once, then the distant tick of it settling. A stalled pulse in the wall, irregular and hollow, as if a pipe reconsidered its job with every degree the temperature fell. A roof knock, slow and spaced, not with the panic of a creature, but with the patience of something counting Joyce. 3. Then 3 again. The first week, the small dog inside stopped eating. The big dog in the yard watched the outer stairs and didn't bark. He kept his head turned as if the steps were speaking, and he didn't want to answer. Under the kitchen sink, I found one more length of tubing I had missed. It had dried into a stiff curve. When I lifted it away, the wood beneath showed a pale arc where the plastic had been, and a darker edge where water once wicked out and failed to evaporate all the way back. At the window, the stairwell light buzzed on its timer. Moths practiced dying around it. The stones sucked the day's heat and gave it back to my cheek through the glass. I counted my breath to 4, stilled, and listened under it. There was the small house hum, the compressor's vowel hidden in the walls, the roof counting again, 3 and 3. I learned the timing of the landing light. I learned how long it held before surrendering to dark. I learned the way the banister threw a vertical band across the window and made it look like a frame for a portrait no longer there. None of that explained the first face. None of that tried. Mom kept notes in the drawer by the stove. Times, sounds, which room, which wall. She made columns for possible causes. Expansion, neighbors, wind, plumbing. She left one column blank. She didn't name it. Near midnight, on a heat-heavy Thursday, I stood again at the window with tap water because the milk was gone. The pane showed the stair, the rail, the moths, the light. Then something moved where nothing should move. Not footsteps on the risers. Not a person ascending. Above the glass, in the strip of air framed by the top of the window and the soffit, hair slid down in a slow, straight spill. Not wind. Smooth, unbroken. Black in the stairlight, then brown when the bulb burned brighter, then black again when the transformer dipped. No scalp, no face, no neck, just hair, as if gravity had been rearranged above the frame and something hung there, inverted, listening. I stepped back one pace and the spill traced my movement, curtain straight, without wave or snag. I stepped forward and it kept its distance. The stairlight flickered. The hair did not. There is a way to open a door quietly when the chain is on. You let the bolt draw, but hold the weight. You tilt the slab 2 fingers wide and sight the seam. I did that. The landing air moved over my skin, warmer than the room. The hair hung where air should move it. The chain cut a bright diagonal across the gap. My eye adjusted to the dark above the frame and drew nothing out of it. The phone rang and stopped. The stair timer clicked. The light went black. I pushed the door closed. The chain lay against the wood with a sound like a thin coin placed into a dish. I checked the deadbolt with my thumb. I wiped the inside of the glass with the heel of my hand and left a clear arc where the fog had been. The big dog in the yard gave a short, single sound, not quite a bark. Then metal somewhere flexed. Mom's pen tapped the drawer once, then twice, then stilled. 3 knocks on the roof. 3 more, spaced the same. I took the tubing I had found, set it on the counter, and measured it against the cabinet's edge. The curve matched the stain. The stain didn't matter. It only proved a shape used to be there. I turned the stair timer up to hold the light longer and watched the moths collect as if the light were a soft well and they were learning how to fall into it. In the window's reflection, my face overlapped the landing. The overlap shifted when I breathed. The pane recorded each clouded circle as if it knew how to keep time without clocks. From the bedroom down the hall, the small dog made the thin throat noise it made when dreams trapped its legs. The outer stairs gave back heat. The roof waited for the count to begin again. I kept the glass in front of me. The glass kept the landing, where I could see it. The night after the hair moved above the window, the house changed its sound. Not louder, just closer, as if the walls had turned inside out. Mom began to write more often. She left her notebook open on the counter now, the pen pressed into the spine so the pages wouldn't close. Time, direction, volume. She recorded them like weather. The roof knocks were still there. 3, then 3. Always with the same pause between. The small dog had stopped sleeping near the bedroom door. He lay instead under the table, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan even when it wasn't moving. The big dog in the yard no longer barked. He only followed something above him, slow and silent, until the leash pulled him back. At noon one day, the air filled with the sharp crack of metal on cement. The same sound Mom said came from outside whenever she was alone. She called it the dropped phone noise. I followed it to the front landing. The stairs were empty, but the handrail was shaking, faintly. I touched it and felt heat, as if someone had held it a moment ago. That night, the air changed again. Not cold, just thinner. Mom had gone out for groceries. The clock on the microwave said 9:47. I waited at the window. Same place, same pain. The stairlight flickered on its timer. Then came the sound, not from outside, from the ceiling above the living room. A dragging, not feet, not claws, something softer, wider, heavier. The boards didn't creak in sequence. They bowed and released, as if weight moved on hands. The small dog whimpered once. Then the ceiling dust drifted down in a thin, straight line, exactly above where I stood. I looked up. The plaster bulged the way a lung does before it exhales. And then it did, with a low breath that smelled of wet stone and copper. A shadow crossed the light. Slow, elongated, not human height. Wrong proportions. The movement had no step, no sound but that breath. It reached the corner above the window and stopped. And then, for the first and only time, it laughed. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried like it knew the shape of every wall. It came from inside the ceiling. One long exhale shaped into words that never finished forming. I ran to the hallway and saw dust falling from the line where the wall met the roof. No one there. The sound ended halfway through a syllable. When Mom came back, she found the big dog limping in the yard, one leg bent the wrong way, paw twisted. She said it must have fallen from the stairs or slipped between railings. I didn't tell her about the sound. That same week, she fell herself. A short trip. One step on the porch, the edge of a cable under her shoe. Her leg broke clean. Doctors said the bone snapped before the muscle had time to react. The cast reached her thigh. The smell of the plaster filled the house, chalky and sterile, covering the copper scent that sometimes lingered near the ceiling. At night, she said she still heard the knocks. 3, 3. Then silence. She tried tapping back with the end of a broom. Nothing returned. But when she stopped, the sound repeated itself. One more set, lighter, closer, as if from the floor instead. The small dog lifted his head each time. His ears tracked the air, not the sound. I tried not to look at the ceiling anymore. But sometimes, when the light flickered and I glanced by accident, I saw that same dark patch. Not moving, just waiting. Mom wrote on the margin of her notebook that night. Something shifted above us. Feels heavier now. Could be pipes. She didn't write again after that line. The next page was blank, except for the faint print of pressure from her pen. An unfinished curve that might have been the start of a word. At 3 a.m., the ceiling gave one last groan. Dust fell in a slow spiral. The small dog's breathing stopped. I counted to 3. Then 3 again. No sound followed. Just that dry, clean air like the house had finished exhaling. I stood beneath it until morning, waiting for something to breathe back. The house stayed quiet for days after Mom's cast set. Too quiet. The kind of silence that waits for you to breathe first. Every door frame held its own shade now. The corners darkened early, even when the sun hadn't dropped behind the hills. The stairwell light began to blink twice before turning on, as if someone below was testing it first. I told myself that houses learned their owners, that the floors, the walls, the pipes all stored the habits of whoever lived there. But this house didn't feel like it was learning us. It felt like it was remembering something it had already known. Mom said the upstairs air was heavy because of humidity. She started sleeping with the window cracked open, even at night. Sometimes I woke up and saw her silhouette standing in the hallway, listening to something above us, not to the roof, to the ceiling itself. She said she could hear breathing between the boards. When she said it, her eyes didn't blink for a long time. Her mouth stayed half open, like she might start praying, but forgot the first word. One evening, I found her notebook on the counter again. The last entry was written in smaller letters, cramped and uneven. Not outside anymore. She didn't remember writing it. The next night, the window changed. It had been a simple thing. Square glass, thin aluminum frame set above the stairwell. But that night, it didn't reflect the stair anymore. It reflected the ceiling. From where I stood in the living room, I could see both, the pane and the plaster above it. When the stair light flicked on, its glow should have shown the outer landing, the railing, the curve of the steps. Instead, it showed an upside-down version of our ceiling, rippled and wet like a pond surface disturbed from beneath. I moved closer. The reflection deepened, like depth had replaced glass. It wasn't showing the landing anymore. It was showing something looking back. At first, I thought it was my own reflection caught in distortion. But the figure didn't mimic my movement. It stood still when I leaned forward, and when I straightened, it tilted its head slightly, as though curious about the mistake I'd made by coming closer. Its hair fell straight down, but in the reflection, gravity pointed the wrong way. The strands lifted toward the ceiling instead of the floor. A slow sway, like breathing. Each movement delayed, as if light itself struggled to follow. I raised my hand to the glass. My reflection raised hers a moment too late. Between our palms was the sound of static. Not electric, not mechanical. It was soft, like paper tearing underwater. And behind that sound came another. A whisper, steady but without words. A vibration that lived inside my ribs instead of my ears. I couldn't understand it, but I felt the meaning. Not speech. Invitation. Mom called from the bedroom, her voice thin under the door. "Don't open it." Her cast thudded once against the floorboards as she tried to move. I looked back. She hadn't left the bed. Her voice came again from behind the door. Closer this time. But when I opened the door, she was still lying there, eyes closed, breathing evenly. The whisper from the window grew louder, matching the rhythm of her breath. Every inhale pulled the whisper higher. Every exhale dropped it lower, as if the house itself was sinking to her lungs. I shut the bedroom door. The air smelled of plaster dust and rain-soaked metal. When I turned back to the window, the figure was gone. But the reflection still didn't show the stairs. It showed the ceiling again, and a faint movement, crawling just under the plaster surface. Lines formed there, shapes that looked like fingers pressed from the other side. 5 at first, then more. They slid slowly, leaving faint trails of darker color, as though the ceiling paint absorbed them. I could hear the scratching then, not from above, but from within. Soft, steady, the sound of nails dragged across wood too thick to break through. I stepped back. The ceiling bulged again. A line cracked along the center seam. Something white sifted down, plaster dust mixed with hair. Human hair. It landed on my wrist, still warm, as if it had been part of something living seconds ago. The small dog began to bark, high and panicked, toward the ceiling. His body stiffened mid-sound, and the bark broke into a dry gasp. When I looked up, a face had formed where the plaster had split. Not a complete face, only the top half. Eyes open, no whites, no pupils, just lightless sockets watching through the gap. The hair I'd seen at the window now hung through that crack, swaying gently, almost reaching the floor. I froze. The air temperature dropped fast enough that the window fogged from the inside, and in that fog, another reflection appeared. The same figure inverted again, watching from behind the glass. Two of them now. One above me, one in front of me, both waiting. Then, all at once, the house sighed. Every wall flexed inward, like lungs pulling air too fast. The window glass trembled but didn't break. The lights cut out. For a full minute, there was nothing. No sound, no light, only pressure. When the stair timer clicked back on, everything returned to stillness. The hair was gone. The ceiling was unbroken. The dog lay silent. Only the smell remained. That same wet stone and copper mix, heavier now, sweet at the edge, as if something old had opened its mouth and then closed it again before it could speak. At dawn, I found Mom's notebook open beside the sink. A new line had been written in her handwriting, neat, deliberate. It looked back. She swore she hadn't touched the pen. The ink was still wet. That was the morning we decided to leave. But even as we carried boxes down the outer stairs, the stair light blinked twice before turning on, as though checking if we were still there. When we drove away, I looked up once. And through the top floor window, something moved the curtain, slow and careful, like it was waving goodbye. Years later, I thought I'd left that house behind. But memory doesn't follow distance. It follows elevation. By the time I entered the Arts Academy, I was 17. The dormitory stood across the road from the practice building. 5 floors, one for each department. Dance lived on the top floor. Always the top. Always the place closest to air, heat, and whatever listens between them. The building had been renovated once, but the mirrors on the 5th floor were older than the plaster around them. You could tell by the silvering, that soft, uneven haze crawling in from the edges like smoke trapped under glass. At night, I stayed later than anyone else. 10:30, sometimes 11. The guards made their rounds with flashlights that swept the hallways once every hour. When their beam passed the door, I would see the shadow of the handle stretch across the floor like a clock hand, then vanish. After that, silence. I danced barefoot. The sound of my heel against the floor told me how big the room was, how alone I was inside it. The ceiling fans turned, but the air didn't move. It just circled. The door had a small glass panel at eye level, the kind meant for safety checks. On the first week, I caught a glimpse of someone standing behind it. A shape, faint, patient. When I opened the door, the corridor was empty. Only the guard's flashlight residue still fading down the stairwell. It happened again. Same hour, same silence. But this time, the figure didn't move away. It leaned slightly closer, the way people do when they're trying to read lips. I thought it was the guard checking in. I waved. No answer. When I stepped forward, the figure stepped back. Except there was no sound of shoes. No weight shift. Just absence. The door was lighter than I expected. It opened with almost no resistance, like air yielding to itself. The hallway was empty again, but the mirrors, the ones behind me, didn't agree. In the reflection, the door was still closed. My own body stood in front of it, hand extended toward a version of the corridor that didn't exist. Behind that reflection, another figure waited, pale, thin, unlit by the fluorescent ceiling strips. Its outline was exact to mine, but its timing was wrong. It blinked when I didn't. It breathed when I held my breath. I looked down at the real floor. No shadow. In the mirror, its shadow stretched all the way to the edge of the frame, where the silvering had started to peel. A sound came from the corner. Not a voice, not a knock. Just a soft, continuous hum, the same note a light makes before it burns out. The ceiling fan slowed, one blade catching the reflection, slicing the image into pieces. For a second, the mirror multiplied the room. There were 4 of me, each turned at a different angle, each half lit, half frozen. And behind them, in the dim strip along the back wall, something moved opposite the rhythm. When I turned, the space was clear. When I faced the mirror again, that movement had come closer. I switched off the light. Darkness is honest. It doesn't try to hide what it shows. In the dim emergency glow, the mirrors turned black, but one still held shape, faint, gray, moving. It stepped forward. Its outline matched my height, but not my pace. Each motion arrived a heartbeat late, as if remembering what I'd done seconds before. Then it smiled. Only the reflection, not me. A thin, upward cut that widened too far, teeth too even, too many. I didn't move. If I moved, it would know I'd seen it. If I stayed still, maybe it would return to glass. The reflection lifted a hand, palm out. Gesture of greeting or warning. Its fingertips pressed against the inside of the mirror. The glass did not resist. It rippled, like water in a jar. I heard the floor behind me creak, though I hadn't shifted my weight. A slow step, then another. Each one matched by a vibration in the mirror, as if the reflection's footsteps echoed into this side of the room. I whispered the guard's name, but the word broke halfway. The hum on the ceiling deepened until it became breathing. Not mine, not from my side. I looked again. The reflection's hand slid downward, leaving 5 dark streaks on the mirror. They didn't fade. They absorbed light, blacker than shadow, as if the glass had been opened somewhere behind the surface. When the overhead light flicked back on by timer, the reflection froze mid-motion. Everything returned to place. My face, my outline, my own hand, trembling slightly, at my side. The streaks remained. 5 long marks, still wet, still glistening. They dripped once onto the floor. I heard the drop hit, but when I looked, the tile was clean. The guard opened the door a few minutes later. He asked if I was still practicing. I nodded. He didn't notice the marks. But as he turned away, I saw his reflection glance back, though his head never moved. I stayed there another hour, staring at the mirrors, waiting for them to clear. They never did. At midnight, I left the 5th floor. The stairwell light blinked twice before turning on. The same rhythm as the house I'd lived in years ago. The same sound before something begins to breathe again. And as I reached the landing, the door behind me clicked, not closing, opening, just wide enough for a shadow to slip through. I thought moving again would reset everything. A new city, a new floor, the kind of apartment that looks the same in every advertisement. White walls, clean corners, nothing old enough to remember. 2nd floor again, always the 2nd. The roof above this one was flat concrete. No stairs this time, just an elevator and a hallway that smelled faintly of paint and metal dust. I told myself that mattered. that the air here was newer, safer. The first nights were quiet. No knocks, no hums, no movement above. Only the refrigerator's slow breathing and the faint click of pipes shifting after dark. I unpacked the last box on a Tuesday. Inside was the mirror from the studio, a small one I'd bought before I left, framed in dull silver, edges flaking where the backing had peeled. It should have stayed in storage, but empty walls need something, and mirrors fill space cheaply. I hung it near the window, just above eye level. That night, when the streetlight outside blinked, I caught a movement inside the glass, not behind me, but behind the reflection of the window. A stairwell. Stone steps I didn't own anymore, and the faint outline of a door half open at the top. I stepped closer until my breath fogged the surface. The fog didn't fade. It drew inward, pulled from the inside out, like something on the other side had inhaled. A noise followed. 3 knocks. Then 3 again. Roof or ceiling, I couldn't tell. I turned off the lights. The apartment flattened into shades of gray. The mirror brightened on its own, holding a light that wasn't in the room. In that light stood a woman. Same height, same hair. But her head tilted the wrong way, as if gravity had reversed for her alone. Her reflection met mine and stayed still, neither approaching nor fading. Behind her, in the mirror, I could see the window from the old house, the second-floor landing. The faint shimmer of air where the hair once moved. I blinked, and the images layered. This room, that house, the studio's mirrored wall, all folding into one reflection that breathed in rhythm with my own. The knocks came again, closer now, not above, but inside the walls. A soft scrape followed, like a hand dragging nails across fresh paint. Then silence, so complete, it felt like sound waiting to happen. I reached out to remove the mirror. The hook snapped before I touched it. The frame fell forward but didn't hit the floor. It hung there, suspended, glass trembling, as though still deciding which side of it belonged to air. A faint breath touched my wrist, warm, familiar, and too near. Then the mirror turned dark, not reflective, not opaque, just absence. The refrigerator motor stopped. The apartment held its breath. 3 knocks, 3 again. The sound came from inside the wall directly above the mirror, the same distance between floors as before, as if the house I left had finally found the ceiling it wanted. I waited for the last set of 3. It never came. The silence that followed was heavier than noise, as if someone on the other side was listening, waiting for me to answer. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I only counted the seconds until morning. And when light finally filled the window, the mirror was clear again, showing nothing but the ceiling above me. But the sound never left. It lived behind it. It was waiting for the next floor to remember me.